Welcome to the Full Moon TV Buff, episode T9d. This episode will cover the werewolf lore, transformations, and the themes from the first 3 seasons of Being Human, which ran from 2009 through 2011. This is since I wanted to cover the entirety of George and Mitchell's stories. I watched this on Amazon Prime and Fandor. I did watch this when it first came out. There is a single long episode, T9, that covers everything in one single package. This is the last of the smaller episodes. As far as the transformation goes, let's start with the fact that we get our first werewolf transformation 3 minutes into the pilot. We get a second transformation at 15 minutes, as well as our first decent look at the werewolf. The second season kicks off with 3 transformations: George, Nina, and the test subject. Season 3 ups the ante by doubling the number of werewolf transformations we see, including a fantastic scene with 4 werewolves facing off against at least a dozen vampires. On top of that, several transformations are much longer and more detailed than any seen before. This show is not afraid of showing us its effects budget when it has to. The werewolf transformation sequences in Being Human are noteworthy for their brutal physicality. Unlike a lot of werewolf stories that use quick cuts or shadows, this show portrays George's transformation as an agonizing, bone-breaking process, emphasizing the horror of his condition. Russell Tovey deserves a lot of credit for the anguished screams and noises he makes that sell the compelling visuals. The makeup and practical effects by Neil Gorton and Millennium FX create a visceral experience that makes the audience feel George's pain each month. The second episode opens with a voiceover clinically describing the lycanthropic transformation in a way I have not seen or heard before, which is so amazing that I'm going to quote it here verbatim. "He should be dead within 30 seconds. The werewolf heart is about 2/3 the size of a human's, but in order to shrink, first it has to stop. In other words, he has a heart attack. All the internal organs are smaller, so while he's having his heart attack, he's having liver and kidney failure too. And if he stops screaming, it's not because the pain has dulled. His throat, gullet, and vocal cords are tearing and reforming. He literally can't make a sound. By now, the pituitary gland should be working overtime, flooding his body with endorphins to ease some of the pain, but that too is shut down. Anyone else would have died of shock long ago, but it won't let him. And that's the thing I find most remarkable. It drags him through the fire and keeps him alive and conscious to endure every second. Nothing like this could just evolve. This is the fingerprint of God, an impossible, lethal curse spread by tooth and claw. Victim begets victim begets victim. It's so cruel, it's perfect. In the Being Human universe, werewolves transform during the single night of the proper full moon. They cannot control their wolf form, have no memories of what they did in wolf form, and the transformation is excruciatingly painful. The condition is transmitted through scratches or bites, but the typical werewolf attack is so violent and thorough that there are very few survivors. Werewolves and vampires are natural enemies, with werewolf blood being toxic to vampires. Vampires love to pick on lycos, as they call them, and kill them when they are stuck in their human form. But they're no match for a werewolf in their monstrous form. Vampires also use werewolves as cruel dogfights, pitting hapless victims against lycanthropics for gambling and entertainment. The show explores how this monthly trauma affects George's psychology and relationships. There is no mention of silver at all that I can remember, and plenty of examples of steel knives hurting werewolves just fine. So now let's move on to the themes. Just a quick note, this show illuminated a flaw in my planning that will require adjustment going forward. When discussing one of these longer running shows with multiple seasons, I'll need to be more flexible in when to break it into individual episodes. I originally had planned on just covering the first 2 seasons, but once it became clear that George and Mitchell's stories run through the first 3 seasons, it was much more effective to cover it all in 3 seasons in one go. All right, here we go. The genius of Being Human's title lies in its ambiguity. Is it a statement or is it a question? What does it mean to be human when your nature includes something definitively non-human? While all 3 protagonists grapple with identity questions, George's lycanthropy provides the most visceral exploration of divided identity and the struggle to define humanity. Unlike Mitchell's chosen vampirism or Annie's imposed ghostly state, George's monthly transformation is an involuntary biological imperative that literally tears him apart and reconstructs him into something else. From the beginning, George establishes a clear boundary between himself and the wolf. He consistently refers to his werewolf self in third person, it, the thing, never I. In the pilot, George tells Mitchell, that's not me. What happens at the full moon, that's not who I am. This linguistic separation demonstrates his core psychological strategy for dealing with it: complete disassociation from his lycanthropic identity. This disassociation manifests physically in his transformation rituals. He prepares soundproofed rooms, containment measures, and disposable transformation outfits. He distracts the wolf with chicken scent. These practical measures double as psychological barriers, reinforcing the separation between his human and wolf identities. By containing the wolf, George believes that he can prevent it from contaminating his real self. This divided identity resonates with psychological traditions that recognize the internal multiplicity as a fundamental aspect of human experience. From Freud's structural model to Jung's shadow concept to more modern ones, many frameworks acknowledge that the unified self is largely a construction. George's extreme division represents a pathological extension of the normal compartmentalization that humans use to reconcile contradictory aspects of themselves. Being Human elevates itself among other werewolf stories through its unflinching portrayal of the transformation as excruciating physical trauma. Unlike quick transformations in other works, George's monthly metamorphosis is agonizing, prolonged, and decidedly non-glamorous. The transformations emphasizes George's suffering, bones breaking and reforming, skin stretching, organs shifting, all accompanied by screams of pain. This physical ordeal serves multiple purposes. It emphasizes the involuntary nature of his condition. Unlike Mitchell, who can choose not to drink blood, George has no choice. The breaking of his human form represents the forced reconstruction of his sense of self every month. Beyond creating sympathy, the transformations serve as a metaphor for identity as an embodied experience. Modern philosophy and cognitive science increasingly recognize that our sense of self is inextricably tied to our physical sensory experience. George's transformations radically disrupt this bodily continuity, literally reforming his sensory apparatus and physical capabilities. His brain chemistry, sensory perception, physical strength, and instinctual drives all fundamentally change. And this poses an intriguing question. If identity is partially constructed by our embodied experience, what happens when that embodiment radically changes? George's lycanthropy also affects how others perceive him. Now, in human form, he presents as non-threatening, even meek. Russell Tovey portrays him with a nervous energy, hunched posture, and hesitant speech. This social identity contrasts sharply with the deadly predator that he becomes, creating tension in how George is perceived and what he becomes. This split creates complex relationship dynamics. Mitchell, as a fellow predator, recognizes and even respects the wolf in ways George can't. George's relationship with Nina is most impacted by his lycanthropy, particularly after he accidentally infects her. Their relationship evolves from George's hiding his condition to Nina's horror at discovering it, and eventually to the mutual acceptance of their shared condition. George's encounters with other werewolves, Tully, Anthony, and Tom McNair, present alternative models for integrating lycanthropy into identity. All three of those have accepted the wolf's influence on their human behaviors, but they're highlighting different strategies for managing stigmatized identity. Through these relationships, George's lycanthropy forces everyone to confront some crucial questions. Can we love someone whose identity includes aspects that we fear? Can we be loved if parts of our identity are that dangerous? Lycanthropy is particularly devastating for George because the wolf is everything he fears. It's disorder, impulse, violence, and loss of control. His transformation forces a monthly surrender of his carefully constructed defenses, revealing that order and control are largely illusions, and that human identity necessarily contains chaotic, primal elements that cannot be permanently suppressed. This parallels Jungian psychology's concept of the shadow integration, the idea that psychological health requires acknowledging and integrating disowned aspects of ourself rather than suppressing them. George's insistence that the wolf isn't me is a rejection of shadow integration, a refusal to acknowledge that the primal impulses of the wolf are indeed aspects of his complete identity. George's most self-destructive behaviors stem not from his lycanthropy itself, but from his desperate attempts to deny or suppress it. This portrayal offers a nuanced perspective. Becoming fully human requires acknowledging rather than denying the aspects of ourselves that we find frightening or shameful. The monthly cycle of George's transformations creates a distinctive rhythm to his experience of identity. Again, unlike Mitchell and Annie's permanent states, George experiences this regular oscillation between human and wolf forms. This cyclical experience reflects how identity development functions more broadly. Rather than resolving who am I once and definitively, humans revisit these questions repeatedly through different life stages and circumstances. George's monthly transformations externalize and dramatize this universal experience of identity as an ongoing process rather than a fixed state. The series explores how these cycles affect George's sense of time and planning, reflecting how identity challenging experiences in human life can reorganize one's relationships to time and future planning. A central philosophical question in being human is whether humanity is defined by biological nature or by choices and values. George's lycanthropy places this in stark relief. If he is biologically a werewolf, can he meaningfully claim to be human? The series ultimately suggests that humanity is defined not by biology, but by moral choices and relationships. Mitchell says being human is a choice. George embodies this philosophy through his determined efforts to maintain human values despite his lycanthropic condition, his meticulous preparations to prevent the wolf from harming others, his continued empathy, and his willingness to risk his safety to protect others all demonstrate a chosen humanity that transcends biological determinism. This philosophical position resonates with contemporary bioethical discussions about the boundaries of humanity. As medical technology increasingly allows for biological modification, questions about what constitutes natural humanity becomes increasingly complex. Being human suggests humanity is defined not by biological markers, but by ethical choices and interpersonal connections. Now, in its most sophisticated moments, being human suggests that George's goal shouldn't be eliminating his wolf nature. He can't get rid of what he is, but he can achieve an integrated identity by acknowledging both aspects of himself. The series reveals George's werewolf nature that provides heightened smell, hearing, and toughness that serve as a metaphor for how aspects of ourselves that we fear and might not like might actually offer valuable strengths when properly integrated. As the series progresses, George's wolf nature increasingly manifests not just as destructive impulses, but as powerful protective instincts as well. His fierce defense of friends and family suggests that the wolf's aggression, when channeled toward protection, represents a positive aspect of his identity. George's human persona tends towards repression and conflict avoidance, but his wolf self expresses emotions directly and without constraint. This integration theme aligns with holistic psychological approaches that view healing not as eliminating something unwanted about yourself, but as achieving greater communication and harmony between the different aspects of identity. George's journey suggests that being fully human means that we need to acknowledge our primal, instinctual, biological aspects. We are what we are, and then we choose what to do with that. George's struggle with lycanthropy ultimately reveals that being human isn't a static state, not defined by our biology or our appearance, but an ongoing process of ethical choice, relational connection, and self-acceptance. His journey from rejecting the wolf as not me to strategic integration mirrors universal human struggles to acknowledge and integrate disowned aspects of ourselves. The series suggests several profound insights through George's character. First, identity is not unitary but multiple. All humans contain contradictory aspects threatening to their preferred self-image. Second, humanity is defined by choices, not nature. What makes George human is not the absence of the wolf nature, but his sustained commitment to human values despite that nature. Third, integration is preferable to division. And finally, relationships are central to humanity. George's connections anchor his human identity more effectively than any physical containment of his wolf nature. Through these insights, being human explores identity in ways that transcend its supernatural premise. George's lycanthropy is a powerful metaphor for the universal human experience of containing multitudes. In our increasingly complex modern world, George's struggle offers a compelling framework for understanding how we all navigate the various aspects of ourselves that might seem frightening or contradictory. His journey suggests that being human isn't about the absence of the monstrous potential within us, but it's about the continuous choice to acknowledge that potential while striving for connections, empathy, and meaning. Being human uses its fantastical premise to explore profoundly human struggles. And while we normally focus on werewolves on this channel, I just can't resist digging into Mitchell's thematic struggle with addiction. John Mitchell is a vampire attempting to abstain from drinking human blood. Through Mitchell's journey, the show creates a compelling metaphorical examination of addiction, relapse, and the complex path to recovery. Blood, Mitchell's substance of choice, is more than a dietary requirement. It's an all-consuming compulsion that fundamentally alters his personality and behavior when indulged. Several aspects of this metaphor particularly resonate with real-world addiction experiences. First, Mitchell experiences blood hunger as both a physical sensation, his eyes darken, his body tenses, and a psychological torment. This dual nature reflects the complex reality of addiction, which operates simultaneously on both physical and psychological levels. As Mitchell explains to George in season 1, it's not just the blood, it's the power, the feeling like you're the most alive thing in the world. Second, when Mitchell drinks blood, he becomes someone else, something more primal, more violent, disconnected from his humanity. This transformation mirrors how substance abuse can create profound personality changes in addicted individuals. In a particularly revealing scene, Mitchell tells Annie, "When I drink, I'm not me anymore. I become something else, something older." This Jekyll and Hyde effect is commonly reported by recovering addicts, describing their behavior while under the influence. Third, Mitchell's relationship with blood follows a recognizable cycle that's familiar to addiction specialists. Abstinence leads to craving. Craving leads to indulgence. Indulgence leads to shame, and shame drives attempts at abstinence, only for the cycle to begin again. After each relapse, Mitchell experiences overwhelming guilt, which paradoxically often drives him toward further consumption as a form of self-punishment or escape, depending. Finally, a crucial aspect of the metaphor is that Mitchell can't be cured of being a vampire. His condition is permanent, and his recovery depends not on eliminating his desire for blood, but on learning to live with it without indulging it, a parallel to the one day at a time philosophy of many recovery programs. Mitchell's attempts at recovery throughout the series highlight several aspects of addiction treatment that mirror real-world experiences. Mitchell's most successful periods of abstinence occur when he has support that provides both accountability and alternative sources of emotional fulfillment. This reflects the importance of support networks in addiction recovery, where isolation often precipitates relapse. As Mitchell tells George, "You keep me human." Mitchell's work as a hospital porter gives him a purpose and a non-vampiric identity, crucial elements in his recovery. His desire to help patients represents an attempt to counterbalance the harm that he has caused, similar to making amends in the 12-step programs. This highlights how recovery often requires more than just abstinence. The recovering addict has to construct a new identity and purpose. Through the series, Mitchell's recovery is threatened by various triggers: the presence of blood, emotional distress, and the manipulation of other vampires. Some of those triggers are external, but many are tied to emotional states or to unresolved traumas, reflecting the complex nature of addiction triggers in real life. In season 2, Mitchell's major relapse comes from his feelings of betrayal and alienation after Lucy's treachery. Other times, Mitchell falls into the trap of believing that he has his addiction under control, leading to situations where he tests his limits and ultimately relapses. This overconfidence is a recognized danger in addiction recovery, where declarations of victory often precede relapses. As senior vampire Herrick warns Mitchell, "You think you've tamed it, but it's just sleeping." One of Being Human's most insightful explorations is how Mitchell's condition affects his relationships. George and Annie become enablers at times, covering for Mitchell and protecting him from consequences of his actions. Their struggle between supporting Mitchell's recovery and enabling his destructive behavior reflects the difficult position of those who love someone with an addiction. Mitchell's relationship with other vampires, particularly Herrick and later Daisy, demonstrate the complicated dynamics of friendships formed around substance abuse. These vampires don't understand Mitchell's desire to abstain and actively undermine his recovery. They see it as a rejection of them personally. Herrick's repeated insistence that Mitchell is denying his true nature parallels how former drinking or using partners often pressure recovering addicts to return to substance abuse. Mitchell's romantic relationships are repeatedly compromised by his addiction, often resulting in his partner's death or in turning them into an addicted vampire like himself. This portrayal captures the difficulty addicted individuals face in maintaining healthy romantic relationships while managing their condition. The vampiric community in Being Human functions as a powerful metaphor for the subculture that often develops around substance use. Among vampires, drinking human blood isn't seen as problematic, but as natural and necessary. This normalization of harmful behavior parallels how substance using communities often develop norms that frame addiction as normal or even desirable. Actions seen as unethical by humans, like murder, are justified as good by the vampires. As Herrick tells Mitchell, what you call murder, I call feeding. It's only your human conscience that makes you see it as wrong. Mitchell's attempts at abstinence are met with derision, manipulation, and violence from vampires who see his choices as a threat to their way of life. This hostility towards recovery is a recognized phenomenon in addiction, where those who still actively are using often react negatively to a peer's attempts to get clean, interpreting it as an implicit criticism of their own choices. Throughout the series, other vampires offer Mitchell seemingly reasonable compromises. Look, drink blood, but don't kill. Only feed on willing participants, or let's use transfusion bags instead of live victims. These compromises mirror the controlled using strategies that often fail for those with serious addictions. The show insightfully portrays how these compromises inevitably lead Mitchell back to his most destructive behaviors. Now, perhaps the most difficult aspect of Being Human's addiction metaphor is its exploration of whether redemption and recovery are possible for someone with Mitchell's history of harm. Now, Mitchell has killed hundreds, actually probably thousands, over his century as a vampire. The series embraces the question of whether someone with such a destructive history deserves or can even achieve redemption. And this parallels a difficult question in addiction recovery. How does one come to terms with the harms that they have caused while actively addicted? Throughout the series, even during Mitchell's best periods, the risk of relapse remains constant. This permanent vulnerability reflects the reality that addiction recovery is never complete, but requires ongoing vigilance. As Mitchell tells Annie in season 3, I'm always one bad day away from becoming a monster. Mitchell's attempts to manage his addiction through willpower alone repeatedly fail. It's only when he builds meaningful connections and finds purpose beyond abstinence that he achieves periods of stability. This highlights the importance of connection and meaning in sustained recovery, moving beyond simple abstinence to deeper healing. Mitchell's character arc across the series traces a recognizable path through addiction and recovery. The first season introduces Mitchell as someone actively working on his recovery but still vulnerable. His partnership with George represents an initial support system, and their shared house becomes a space where both can manage their conditions. The season's climax, where Mitchell resists the ultimate temptation to return to killing alongside Herrick, represents his first major victory in recovery. The second season, however, explores Mitchell's catastrophic relapse during the Box Tunnel 20 massacre, where he and Daisy killed 20 train passengers in a blood-fueled frenzy. This relapse comes after Mitchell experiences rejection, isolation, and trauma, common precursors to relapse and addiction. The season unflinchingly portrays both the immediate horror of Mitchell's actions and their long-term consequences for his psyche and relationships. The final season with Mitchell explores the most difficult aspects of recovery, making amends, accepting consequences, and confronting whether some harms are simply too great to overcome. Mitchell's efforts to protect his found family while evading justice for his crimes highlight the complex moral territory of addiction recovery, where genuine remorse must coexist with accountability. Now, Mitchell's ultimate end, asking his friend George to kill him because he knows he will relapse again, represents a tragic acknowledgement of the limits of his recovery and the fatal consequences of falling off the wagon because he's a vampire, right? Not because he's an addict. This is the point at which the metaphor breaks, and we shouldn't read into it that we expect or want addicts to kill themselves. Being Human succeeds because it captures the visceral, compulsive nature of addiction while maintaining empathy for the addicted individual. By using vampirism as its central metaphor, the show explores addiction's darkest aspects, its potential for violence, its destruction of relationships, its resistance to simple cures, without glamorizing substance use or demonizing those who struggle with it. The series ultimately suggests that being human is a continuous effort, a commitment to connection, empathy, and harm reduction in the face of overwhelming compulsions. Mitchell's journey, with its victories, its failures, and its ambiguous conclusion, reminds viewers that recovery is a complex, ongoing process of choosing humanity over destructive impulses, one moment at a time. For viewers in recovery or those who love someone struggling with addiction, Mitchell's journey offers both hope and realism, acknowledging the permanent nature of addiction while affirming that connection purpose and the choice to minimize harm matter. Even when recovery remains imperfect, in its supernatural wrapping, Being Human delivers one of television's most human portraits of the struggle against our darkest compulsions. I've never struggled with addiction, and I don't have a loved one who does. So I acknowledge I'm not an expert here. If you have insight, please add it. The last thing I want to talk about is found family. Found family is a powerful theme in modern storytelling. It shows that relationships that form outside of blood ties, where people choose to care for each other throughout shared experiences and mutual support. Unlike traditional families that are based on biology or marriage, found families form when people consciously decide to support one another through life's challenges. The TV series Being Human perfectly demonstrates this concept. The show features 3 supernatural characters whose monstrous natures actually help them form deeply human connections with each other. Found families typically emerge when traditional support systems fail. Individuals feel isolated, rejected, or misunderstood by regular society, and this creates a need that can be filled by others who share similar experiences. In Being Human, each character represents a different kind of social outcast. Mitchell is a vampire who preys on humans. George transforms into a dangerous werewolf each month. Annie exists as a ghost, caught between life and death. Their shared apartment is a sanctuary where they can be themselves while trying to stay human despite these supernatural conditions. This pattern appears throughout popular culture. The Chosen shows Jesus' disciples as a found family, united by their calling. Brooklyn Nine-Nine presents a police precinct where coworkers become each other's main emotional support. The Fast and the Furious franchise centers on Dom Toretto's crew, bound by loyalty and mutual protection. Guardians of the Galaxy transforms criminals and outcasts into heroes through their commitment to each other. Now, it's not just found families. Even traditional families are strengthened by shared experiences, as seen in The Haunting of Hill House with the Crane family. Traditional families operate under biological obligation, but they don't start that way. We do choose our partner, even if we can't choose our parents or our children. We don't get to choose all our relatives, we get to choose some of them. And cultural expectations often demand loyalty, regardless of compatibility. Found families do work a little differently, operating through chosen obligations that carry deeper emotional weight, precisely because it stems from a decision rather than accident of birth. Without biological ties, these bonds do require constant cultivation and renewal. They can't rely on genetic programming or on social expectations to maintain themselves during difficult periods. In Being Human, the characters repeatedly choose to stay together despite having opportunities to separate. Mitchell could join vampire communities. George could isolate himself to protect others. And Annie could move on to whatever awaits after death. Being Human explores these vulnerabilities through storylines where external pressures threaten the trio's bonds. Government agencies investigate their supernatural activities. Vampire hierarchies demand Mitchell's loyalty, and Annie's unfinished business creates ongoing instability. Instead, they consciously recommit to their shared household and mutual support, even adding additional members like Nina. This theme appears in other shows too. The crew of Firefly operates as a found family, bound by choice rather than necessity. And the Umbrella Academy presents an interesting hybrid, where characters raised as siblings must choose to become a genuine family as adults. Successful found families demonstrate remarkable adaptability, evolving to accommodate changes in memberships, circumstances, and individual needs. Being Human illustrates this through character departures and arrivals, with the core found family structure surviving transitions while maintaining its supportive function. This flexibility distinguishes found families from more rigid structures. While biological families often struggle or can struggle to accommodate members who deviate from expected roles, found families typically form specifically to embrace those differences and provide support for unconventional choices. Found families can also transition into more traditional families, like we discussed. George and Nina begin as a romantic couple and are expecting a child together by the end of season 3. The story as old as humanity itself and the biological family. The popularity of found family narratives in contemporary media reflects broader social changes in how we understand kinship, belonging, and mutual obligation. As traditional family structures become less universal and social mobility increases, more people find themselves distant from their biological relatives. Found family concepts provide models for creating meaningful connections and support systems outside of conventional frameworks. These narratives also challenge traditional hierarchies by demonstrating that these bonds can form horizontally between peers choosing to support each other. I do think traditional family narratives used to be more common. I remember the Waltons, Little House on the Prairie, and the Brady Bunch from my youth. But shows like Modern Family demonstrate that traditional family narratives do continue to remain popular and relevant. Being Human demonstrates that found family relationships can provide that emotional sustenance, moral guidance, and practical support that are traditionally associated with biological kinship, while offering some other additional benefits. The series shows that human capacity for connection extends beyond genetic bonds and can flourish when individuals consciously choose to commit to each other. The show's supernatural framework illuminates universal truths about human connection. We all carry aspects of ourselves that we fear others might reject. Authentic relationships require vulnerability and acceptance, and our greatest strength often emerges through supporting others who share our struggles. Through Mitchell, George, and Annie's chosen family, Being Human offers hope that belonging is always possible, and that no one is too different or damaged to deserve love and support, and that the families that we choose can provide healing and purpose, even when traditional structures may have failed. In a world where many feel isolated despite constant digital stimulation, these stories remind us that genuine intimacy and mutual care remain not only possible, but they're essential for human flourishing. The monstrous trio's journey towards humanity suggests that we all have the capacity to transcend our darker natures through the transformative power of chosen love and mutual commitment. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing the last 2 seasons of Being Human from 2012 and 2013. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.